Chapter 21 of Psychopomp Drive. Written by Janeen Leese-Taylor. Read aloud by SkyAsimaru. Chapter 21 Seemingly Immortal. Glass clattered to the floor behind them in the doorway, and Finley turned to see the instant that Alvaro Carlson's grief turned to rage. The glass shards of disused containment jars and photo frames rolled across the hardwood floor as the broader man pushed past them to lift Saulo by the fur at the base of his neck. He held the grim aloft, bringing him to level with his eyes.
"What the hell do you mean he no longer exists?"
the Amarini demanded with a snarl. The Grim's eyes lifted to meet his own, the galaxies there seemingly lost and vacant of stars.
"I'm sorry, Alfie," he consoled. "We all knew the risks of a second death."
Alvaro gritted his teeth.
"That's impossible! There's no way!"
he shouted, shaking the animal where he hung from his fist. Saulo's paws dangled limply towards the floor, where it was as if the fight had gone out of him entirely.
"Only the void of Tartarus is capable of erasing a spirit like that!"
The Grim made a pitiful sound as it faced the ground. It was the first time since Finley had met him that he actually thought of him as a cat. He seemed so small suddenly, hanging from the other man's grip.
"The power of the Destroyer. It was something that we could never have predicted. The way that it can control the other hollows."
The large Swedish Amarini's grip on the Grim's dark fur tightened.
"I don't want to hear this shit!"
"Alvaro!" Abby interjected, his name catching in her throat as she rushed over to the man and grasped his wide arm in both of her small hands.
"Stop, please! This isn't Saulo's fault!" "Yes, Alvaro,"
Rykart growled in agreement, taking a cigarette from the box in his hand and placing the end of it into his mouth.
"This is not very becoming. Please settle yourself so we can talk like calm adults."
The man squeezed his fingers around the end of the cigarette as he pulled a drag, trying to still the subtle shaking of his hands. The spark of Alvaro's anger flared into a bright flame.
"Do I look like I want to have a Jovla conversation right now, Reich?"
he snapped, glaring back at the first Amarini.
"He did this. He sent us out there without any preparation, without knowing what it was we were facing, what we were risking." "States knew the risks,"
Rykart countered, ears pointing backwards as he bared his fangs through the white clouds of his breath.
"Taking your anger out on Saulo helps no one. We are all grieving his loss." "But he was the one that sent him out there,"
Alvaro continued, tears forming in the corners of his eyes as he slowly turned to face the Grim again.
"He sent him out there, and now he's gone."
Another hand on his arm stilled his movements, and he turned his head to meet Finley's soft green eyes on the other side of him.
"Put him down, Alfie,"
he said, his voice small.
"The others are right. This isn't Saulo's fault."
Alvaro scoffed and dropped their leader back onto the table, the animal rolling its shoulders in a very human-like expression of discomfort.
Alvaro. If I had only known. Don't give me that crate, the gruff man countered,
throwing his hands up as he turned away from him and walked back into the living room.
You knew what was going to happen, and you were still willing to... We all knew the risks something like this could pose,
Scrappy interrupted, their voice rough from crying. They lifted their head from the table as if the weight of the world was pressing down on them, and cleared their throat as they prepared to speak.
Besides, States was the one who told us to answer that distress call. He didn't want to leave those people alone with that thing.
What exactly went wrong out there? Abby questioned from behind them, kneeling to pick up the slivers of broken glass that had become embedded in the carpet. Wasn't there supposed to be a god with you?
Master Kraby accompanied the first group, along with his brother Imsit,
Salo stated, eyes downcast.
They too were lost, alongside 3 other Amarini from Petra's brood.
The cat shook his head and stared down at his paws.
It's a huge loss for the underground. Horus is inconsolable at the loss of his 2 sons.
Horus's twins too? Micah gasped, her hands covering her mouth. I don't understand. How could this even happen? Gods aren't supposed to die like this. Gods are supposed to be uncorruptible. Hollow magic has never worked on them before.
The god that was corrupted, the one that became the destroyer, Finley started. You said it was one of the gate guardians. Who was she?
The heads of those around them turned, and Salo made a noise like clearing his throat.
Her name was Maka when I knew her, he answered. She was a pagan goddess, a woman who had long outlived her worshippers. She was heralded as one of the sisters of life, death, and war, a descendant of Dawn.
Dawn, Finley repeated.
The master of Psychopomp Drive?
The animal Grim nodded, his tiny bell rattling softly.
She was his youngest daughter, a sister of Bav and Morrigan, one of the angels of Hell's Gates. That explains why we didn't hear a peep about it until now,
Alvaro scowled, rubbing at his face with a large hand.
The higher gods wouldn't have wanted word of her betrayal to become common knowledge amongst the spirit community.
It would cause a panic, Spectre agreed, his leg bouncing nervously where he stood at the head of the table.
Salo, we must determine our next course of action,
Rykart implored, letting out a huff of light-colored smoke.
Our magic is not strong enough to stand up against a god of this caliber, and Maka will only grow more powerful the more that she feeds. Then we are left with no other option but to summon dear Tacita,
Salo answered. Scrappy raised their head again with a questioning look, wiping at their nose with the back of their hand.
The silent goddess? Who's that? Finley asked, looking around the room. Dia Tacita created the spells that hide us from the living, Rykart noted. She is an incredibly powerful magic user, but a tad solitaire.
She offers silence with her wordless voice. She protects us from the living world so that we can creep and hide,
Spectre remarked. His eyes sparkled purple, as if he was using his sensitive powers to see something the others were unable to.
She dreams in spoken language. The pen is mightier than the sword.
You want to create a new spell?
Alvaro concluded, raising a thick-fingered hand to point at the Grim on the table.
You think that she can give us something to fight Maka?
The cat nodded.
I believe that what we require right now is strategy. Force alone will not be enough. Where is she, this silent goddess?
Finley questioned as he rested one hand on the sofa beside him. He let his thumb draw circles over the material, taking comfort in the rough burn of the fabric on his doll's skin.
In the deepest chambers of Psychopomp Drive, Sallow replied, at the point where the 5 rivers, Styx, Phlegethon, Lethe, Archeron, and Cocytus meet.
The Necromantion,
Spectre breathed. To be continued in Chapter 22.